Hello, welcome to Australia, welcome to Perth, welcome to the Wacker. That's where we are, in case you couldn't guess by the big sign in the background. So we've been in Australia, a bit jet lagged, just over 24 hours now.
Something like that.
And how are we feeling about everything, Sid? What's it been like?
It's been really great, actually. I've so far not suffering too much from jet lag, I hope, although I might be just kidding myself. So, but no, there's a lot of tournament advertising around in Perth. When we came in on the bus from the airport, there were loads of banners hanging up on the road all into Perth. And then in the city centre, we went wandering around yesterday afternoon, and we were just wandering randomly, and we saw another load of banners. And then we actually ran into something in an event in Perth city centre, didn't we, Raf?
Yeah, it was basically a big tournament launch. So they had people bowling with big balls in nets, and then there was a stage set up, and they got the England and the South African teams up on the stage, did a bit of a Q&A. We had some great music, and obviously there was some cultural phenomena chosen to represent the different nations. What did we have, Sid?
Well, there was a gospel choir that apparently is run by Chloe Tryon's aunt, who came from South Africa to represent South Africa, and they did the South African national anthem and a couple of other songs. That was lovely. And then to represent England, we had Morris dancers. Now, you know, when they're getting the Morris dancers out, it's got serious, Raf.
It's very true. It's very true. Yeah, they found them from somewhere. And they, you know, and they had the South African team were joining in with the gospel singing, and it was lovely. And then the guy on the stage said, "Right, I'm hoping to see the England team joining in with the Morris dancers." And Catherine Brunt, you know, did a interesting attempt at some Morris dancing in front of the stage. So that was all fun. But yeah, no, there's a real buzz in the city, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely, and there's definitely a great awareness into it. We've run into people, you know, in the street that have mentioned it to us and things when we've been on the bus and things. So, you know, it feels like Australia have done a fantastic job. There's adverts on the front cover of the newspaper saying, you know, get on down there, and you know the Wacker here is decorated out in all the colours and everything. So it's really wonderful to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on to the actual cricket. The opening match of the tournament is later today. That's going to be Australia v India. That's not here, that's in Sydney. So we're going to be watching that on TV, like a lot of people watching this video, I suppose. How important is that as an opening fixture? Because it's quite a big one. Australia and India, definitely two contenders in this tournament.
Yeah, it's definitely, arguably the biggest match of the group stages, kicking off first, and it should be a good match. Whether it's really important in the greater scheme of things or not, I don't know, in the sense that both those teams will be expecting to qualify from the group stages. So to a certain extent, it probably doesn't, one of them's got to lose this match, and the one that loses this match will probably still think that they're going to qualify. I guess what it does do is if you win this match, it does mean you can kind of take a mulligan against New Zealand or whatever, and it doesn't matter if you lose to New Zealand if you've already won this match. But I don't think that, you know, one team's got to lose it. I don't think the team that does lose it will be, you know, overly concerned. They'll be thinking that they can beat New Zealand and win their two minnow matches to still easily qualify for the semi-finals.
I guess to some extent India have got a bit of a reputation of winning those group stage matches and then losing the all-important kind of fight to the death matches. So last time in the Caribbean in 2018, India beat Australia famously in that group stage match, and then they lost the final to England by a big the semi-final to England by a big margin. So, you know, to some extent India will, I suppose, be hoping that history does not repeat itself in that respect.
Yeah, and I guess there's another element there potentially that if you might be thinking that if you win this match you could possibly avoid England in the semi-final, but you know that doesn't always work out, as it didn't work out in the Caribbean, because England wound up losing to the West Indies, and you know that what made the difference there. So you didn't wind up avoiding England by winning that match. But I think I'm really looking forward to seeing it as a match. You know, there's going to be a certain, you know, buzz going on around that match. You know, we've seen the Tri-Series, and the Tri-Series has been competitive. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but this is going to be taking it to a whole new level in terms of, you know, the pressure and the atmosphere and things. So it's going to be great.
One bit of news that came in, I think it actually came in while we were on the plane, is that Australia have lost their big pace bowler, big gun, Taylor Vilemic, and that is a bit of a blow to Australia because she really looked very good in the Tri-Series, as well as being very quick, which we'd seen of her in England in the Women's Ashes. She also looked to have been very accurate, and she actually bounced out a number of batsmen from both England and India during the Tri-Series. So how big a loss is that for Australia, do you think?
Well, I think it is a big loss. I mean, in the sense that what they've generally gone for is they've gone for more of the all-rounders, and they've replaced her with a player, Molly Strano, that's more of an all-rounder. And I think that they really justified Taylor Vilemic on the grounds that she's going to come in and take wickets. She's not someone that's ever going to give you many runs with the bat. She'll probably bat at 11 and come in and whack a lucky 4 if you're fortunate. So there's a really big gamble there that. Or not a gamble, but there's a calculation that she'll come in and take wickets, and they've looked at their options and they've gone there isn't anybody else that's going to be able to be an actual raw threat wicket-taking bowler, and so they've gone for a different option completely. So I think that itself suggests that the Australians are going to feel that, and there'll be plenty of batsmen throughout this World Cup that are thinking, phew. Yeah. Because she was really worrying them. She was worrying the best batsmen that England and India had to offer. So it's a big blow for Australia, I think.
So we mentioned the Tri-Series there, which obviously concluded a couple of weeks ago with Australia winning ultimately. What do you think we learnt from that, Sid? Particularly things that are pertinent going into this World Cup.
Well, I think that I really learnt something in the sense that what India did. What India really proved is that we have talked about this before a little bit, but what India really proved is that that they're up there in terms of competition with England and Australia. That we've got used to over the last few years, maybe saying that England and Australia are way out there. I have a colleague in my day job back home who's Indian and supports their team, and there's been a few times in the last year when she's picked me up and gone, when I've talked about the top 2, she's gone, there isn't a top 2, Sid. It's a top 3. There's India are in that top 3 as well, and India really proved that in that Tri-Series that they beat England in terms of the round robin stages. They beat out England to get to the final. So yeah, it's a top 3 there, and even if you're talking about a top 2, England are definitely really outside that top 2 in terms of those very recent results. So it proved that India are really competitive. We knew what Australia were capable of doing, and they did it, and they turned on the style in the matches that matter, or turned on the got the results where it mattered. But India's ability to compete at that highest level was really shown for me in that, and I think that I've really come to terms with now the fact that it's definitely a top 3.
Okay. I think from my perspective, England actually will have taken a lot of confidence from that Tri-Series, despite the fact that they didn't reach the final. To some extent, not reaching the final was on a little bit of a technicality. Obviously, they should really have won that last match, but they didn't. But I do think they'll take confidence from the fact that they did manage to beat both Australia and India. They did seem to have regrouped significantly since they were absolutely thrashed by Australia last summer in the Women's Ashes. And I think that the fact that they managed to beat Australia in that super over was quite significant as well. I know that Matthew Mott subsequently has very much made light of that in interviews and basically said, we hadn't really practiced super overs and we weren't really trying, we didn't really have our tactics in order. Well, I think first of all, if that's true, then it's a poor show, and the best resource team in the world don't have their tactics in order for a super over, and secondly, I don't really believe him. I think he's trying to put a brave face on the fact that really they were outmanoeuvred by England in that super over. We saw that England were trying to trick them into thinking they were going to bowl Nat Siver, and they ended up bowling Sophie Ecclestone. So I think that was quite a significant moment in terms of the psychological battle.
Yeah, definitely, and England will certainly feel very positively about that. I think the Australian spin is even regarding that. You go, well, the match was a tie, and England won the penalty shootout, so to speak. But England were certainly the fact that the group stage of the Tri-Series ended as they did on a round robin tie overall, and it all went down to net run rate anyway, shows that that England are able to compete with Australia.
What do you think England's chances are overall in the tournament? We're going to do more preview videos of England's individual matches, but at this stage, what would you say?
Their chances are definitely okay. I think that they will be very, very disappointed given the group they're in if they don't reach the semi-finals. And I think that once you get to the semi-finals, you'll go, well, anything could happen. But that means that anything could happen from a positive perspective as well as a negative perspective. I think that England's best shot remains that Australia somehow have a bad day in their semi-final, lose the semi-final, and that England wind up playing someone else in the final. Potentially South Africa in the final under those circumstances. And if it was an England versus South Africa final, then you'd have to put your money on England at that point. But neither of us are backing England to win the tournament in terms of like who we're going to say is going to win in our prediction, are we, Raf?
No, I think if you're not going to predict Australia to win this tournament, then you're either an extreme super fan of another side, or you haven't really been keeping up with international women's cricket recently, I guess.
Yeah, I think that if England will be disappointed if they don't make the semi-finals, Australia will be disappointed if they don't win it. It really is theirs to win, I think.
Okay. A couple of slightly worrying developments from England's perspective, just to add to that, in the last couple of days. They obviously lost that warm-up match to Sri Lanka by 10 wickets, so an absolute thrashing there, which is a little bit unexpected. They're not facing Sri Lanka in the group stages, so that will be perhaps something of a relief for them after that result. The other thing is Nat Sivit injury watch. We know that she's had was it a leg injury? Hang on, I've got the... It was a medial ligament injury to her right knee. So she's missed a couple of the latest warm-ups, hasn't she? Or the very latest warm-up anyway. So slight concern there, because I do feel that England are very much relying on her to be able to bowl 4 overs. Lisa Keightley's recently said that she thinks that Nat Sivit can be the best all-rounder in the world. And so they are kind of heaping the expectations there on her bowling, really, aren't they?
Yeah, and she's a very important part of their batting lineup, and I definitely think that she's one of those players they won't want to do without. If you start crossing off players going, who can England live without, she's maybe second or first on that list, to be honest. Her and Heather Knight are definitely will be the ones where you'd start ticking first as who England don't want to be without. The good news is that we saw Nat yesterday at this launch. She was wearing a pair of skinny jeans, and there definitely wasn't any strapping on at her knee, or if there was, it was very well disguised. While mind games definitely aren't beyond the England management, I don't think they'd have been playing mind games by sending her out to a event where she was going to be on her feet for a couple of hours without any strapping if there was a problem. So I think that she'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, we're expecting her to play against South Africa in England's opening match on Sunday. Yesterday we put out a call for questions on Twitter, and we did have a couple come in, so we'll just deal with those quickly now. UK Crunch, aka Ruth, says, which team do you think will win the biggest? Not necessarily win the tournament, but gain the most from the experience / exposure, etc. Any thoughts on that, Sid?
Yeah, well, I think that India still are in a great position to grow even more. That we've seen how the reaction to the game has grown in India since the 2017 World Cup final. We've seen like the vast increases in the Twitter followings of the Indian players. Now they've gone from having less followers than us to having 100 times more followers than us. And but I still think that India have got a way to go, and I think that this tournament will provide a really important window for the Indian nation to have even more exposure to their team. And I think that India is going to be the future of the game, right? And we're pushing towards, gradually pushing towards a women's version of the IPL, and I think that this tournament can only help with that, especially as India looks set to do quite well, hopefully.
I mean, I guess the obvious answer to the question is probably Thailand, given that this is the first that we've seen of them at a global tournament. Not necessarily expected to win any matches. If they did manage to pull off a win, I think that would be huge for them. But ultimately, just being here is going to massively add to the exposure that women's cricket and cricket generally gets in Thailand and in that part of the world. So I think that's exciting in terms of the global growth of the game. The other thing I'd say is, well, you've mentioned them already, South Africa. You're touting them as a potential prospect to get to the final, Sid, or at least I think that's what you were saying. But I think, you would expect South Africa, alongside England, to qualify from England's group to get to the semi-finals, and even just getting to the semi-finals is quite big still, I think, for South Africa from their perspective. They would obviously hope to go one better or even two better, but they've got a very, very good chance of getting to the semi-finals, so that's great. We did have one other question come in on Twitter from Fleur Loveridge at Subterra Fleur. Is Tammy Beaumont down the order really the best solution? Experience and adaptability, yes, but she often needs longer to get going than some of the others.
I think this is a really interesting question, and Tammy Beaumont's definitely. I think that overall, Tammy Beaumont has been England's best batsman and throughout all formats over the last 3 years or so, and I think that therefore that she becomes a key component in the lineup. One thing that I was advocating last summer though was her being used a bit more flexibly generally, because I felt that there were other batsmen that really needed to be in particular positions. So we were saying last summer that Amy Jones really needed to be opening the batting, Danny Wyatt really needed to be opening the batting, and that actually it's not a problem moving Tammy Beaumont down to 3 or 4, because she has the ability to bat well in all those positions. She's not going to be phased wherever she's doing it. She's justifiably, got a lot of confidence in her ability these days, and in her class and in her ability to, adapt to any situation. So I think that generally her coming down the order isn't an issue. I think the issue here potentially is obviously, if she's batting down as low as 6, does that mean that she has so few balls to face that it becomes kind of pointless her being all the way down there, and it would have been better if she'd come in at 3? And I think there is an argument there, but I think that what England are really looking at here, and what Lisa Kiteley is really looking at, is a kind of change in the mindset of what the women's game is about. That in the men's game for a long time, what we've seen when we see the game on television, what we often see is some, about 14 or 15 overs, we see some predictors. What will there be? How many runs will there be if they score this many an over, this many an over? And those predictors tend to be based on the men's game, where you're looking at, people saying, what will they score if they score 12 runs and over? And you're looking at it going, no, these are not going to score 12 runs and over, guys. That's completely pointless. It's not going to happen. Whereas Tammy Beaumont is the kind of person that could potentially give you that genuine finishing role, which will allow you to post those huge additions to your total in the last few overs, which we did see at one point in the Tri-Series, didn't we? We saw England post a lot of runs in the last 4 or 5 overs in one of those Tri-Series games. So I think that's where the impact could be, and that could wind up being really important. So it could be a price worth paying if in a crucial game Tammy can come in with 4 overs left and get that run rate up to that 12 and over, which will mean that England can wind up posting a huge total, which will win them those games.
Yeah, potentially. I still don't really agree with it as a strategy. It'll be interesting to see whether it comes off. I still think that number 6 is far too low for somebody who I consider to be probably England's best batsman. So yeah, I think that it's a bit of a waste. But Lisa Kiteley's the coach. I am not. Anyway, so that's the end of our little tournament preview video. We'll be bringing you all the coverage from around Australia over the next few weeks. We're really excited to get going. As we've said, England's first match is against South Africa here at the Wacker on Sunday. So see you there.